Okay, my friends, so we're currently editing my second book. The last live that I done was about how I was sort of stuck in a job that was becoming very unfulfilling, and it was just like a groundhog day where I would just go to work every single day for the sake of just earning money. So stay with me on this one where I talk about the next chapter, which is actually called The Escape Plan, and then I talk about a part of my life that literally threw my life upside down. So let's get going. So this chapter is called Escape Plan. My partner really loved her job to the point that sometimes it would feel like it was more than she loved me. I really wish I loved my job that much, but instead I felt that I had no passion or purpose in my life. I remember we both sat down together one afternoon and we discussed the possibility of me changing careers. We looked at how long we had left on our mortgage payments and noted down some of the things I enjoyed doing in my free time. Well, we have many years left on the mortgage repayments, and what I enjoyed doing at my leisure was an absolute mystery to me. I knew that I enjoyed going on holidays and spending time with her, but wasn't sure what else. Around the corner from our house was a golf club where I had just started playing. I enjoyed this newfound game of golf, so we looked at jobs to do with me one day working at the golf course, and both decided that I need to change it. So we looked at jobs to do with me potentially. Sorry, 1 second. Let me start that a little bit again. I enjoyed this newfound game of golf, so we looked at jobs to do with me potentially working at the golf course, and both decided that I would one day train to become a greenkeeper. Sounds great, right? In this moment, I was feeling so lost, so unhappy, and so unfulfilled in my life. But surely I should have been so happy, right? I had a house, I had multiple holidays to look forward to, and I had an amazing partner who I loved to spend all my time with. Not forgetting, I now had the thrilling future of learning how to become a greenkeeper to look forward to. In reality, the reality was that none of this perceived perfect life was making me happy at all. This was because I wasn't progressing. I had no purpose, and I was actually bored with my life. I had nothing exciting to wake up and jump out of bed to. And even though I didn't have any real dreams or aspirations at that point in time, I had almost certainly thrown away any potential future ones by settling for this incomplete life of mediocrity. Also, at this moment in time, I absolutely hated being alone and couldn't stand my own company. My partner worked all the hours she could doing the job that she loved, and as a result, I had too much free time to spend in my very own dreaded company. Without even realising it, I had become reliant on somebody else to provide me with what I thought was happiness. I'm going to put that in italic. Without even realising it, I had become reliant on somebody else to provide me with I've become reliant on somebody else to provide me with what I thought was happiness, all because I was desperate for any kind of company. I honestly felt that I needed either a dog or a child to look after so I could focus all my energy and attention on them. I even contemplated a marriage proposal at one point, believing that would bring me some sort of happiness. I felt extremely lost in my life. Okay, this is the next part. This is the chapter called The Year That Flipped My Life Upside Down. 2018 started off great as my partner and I went on 2 long weekend breaks to Europe and also made plans to build an extension to the rear of our house. Even though I was still fed up with work and continued to spend a lot of time on my own, things seemed pretty good, or so I thought. Later that year, we went on a long break to Asia, which was wonderful. However, there were daily arguments which started over what seemed to be nothing. We were living this perfect life, but still arguing. I was so confused. Coming back to a newly built extension, we soon planned and set off on our next getaway to Budapest. Again, such a stunning place, but I'm sure you can guess what happened. More arguing, and I still couldn't wrap my head around why. The next few months went by, and I was back to those dreaded Groundhog Days. Eat, sleep, argue, repeat. I was convinced my partner was working way too hard, as she would spend so much time at work. She would work all day and night, whilst I, on the other hand, was sat at home all alone, twiddling my thumbs. It seemed like we both needed another holiday, so we decided to go and visit sunny Florida. This would surely cheer us up, give us a rest and some well-needed vitamin D. But as soon as we arrived at the airport, I'm sure you can all guess what happened. An explosive argument erupted as we couldn't find the rental company for the car which we had pre-booked. We were in and out of the airport for hours trying to locate it. I need to do a comma there. Comma. And after multiple buses and taxi rides, we managed to find the company, but we never used them as they were crooks. So once again, back to the airport for another bus stop. I literally wanted to cry, turn around and get on the very next plane back home. This argument had literally set the tone for the rest. How have I said literally? Yeah, I need to take that out. This argument had set the tone for the rest of the holiday. For sure we had some good times, however, the constant confrontation overpowered all the positives. It was so draining to the point that I felt like I actually wanted to go back to work for a break from it all. After arriving back home to England, it was only a matter of days before my partner suggests that we should stop spending as much time with each other. What? I was so baffled because we lived together, but she said that we should stop spending as much time together. And how was that going to work? For a long period prior to this, I would see her for about 30 minutes in the morning before we both left to work, and sometimes only seeing her during the early hours as she came back home from work extremely late most nights. The only time I had to spend with her was on the weekends, but only if neither of us were working. I felt gutted to hear her suggestion, however, she insisted that it was only temporary as she needed some space. The feeling of being alone got a whole lot worse. I felt so bad, and before you know it, we were both sleeping in separate rooms. She told me one day that she just wanted to be single. There and then my heart began to fall apart. First she said that we may get back together, but we may not, which gave me slight hope. But only until the point where she said that I should start doing things on my own and get used to being in my own company a lot more. Deep down I knew this was the end, but I refused to accept it and admit it to myself. I held on to that little glimmer of hope that we may one day work things out. So I made sure that the living arrangement that she asked for was amicable and gave her as much space as she needed. But it seemed that the more space that I gave her, the more we drifted apart. My mood took a swift downhill spiral, especially with Christmas rapidly approaching, because all the joy of the festive season made being alone so much more difficult. I was lost, I was confused, I was broken. All I kept thinking was, what do I do with my life? The feeling of complete loneliness began to dig its roots in deep, and waking up on Christmas Day alone in an empty home was difficult, surrounded by the deafening sound of silence. I managed to drag myself up and out of bed to get in the shower, where I sat down and cried for a while. It sounds awful, but I had to force myself to get up and over to my parents' house and spend Christmas Day surrounded by my loved ones. A day full of presents, games and delicious Christmas dinner, but I wasn't feeling it at all. I just wanted to go back home, curl up and cry myself to sleep in my bed. So I did just that. What had my life come to? I realised that this perfect life was not all that it was cracked up to be. I just wanted out. So in the new year, I decided that it would be best for both of us if we sold the house. Deep down, I didn't want to, but for my own sanity, I knew that it was the best thing to do, as I couldn't go on like this for much longer. It felt like I was a prisoner trapped within the walls of my own home. And in the midst of all of this, I still had to clock in at work each day to pay for the displeasure of living in confinement. I was in such a deep and dark place mentally. I used to say to myself that going to work was like going to hell. I had to check in at hell every single day to pay for my membership in prison. I couldn't do that for much longer. I wanted liberation. However, for some odd reason, my partner said that she wasn't ready to sell the house, which made me repeatedly ask myself the question, was she having second thoughts? We had a trip to Cape Town booked for March, and she had already told me that she wasn't going. I was emotionally drained and extremely confused. I wanted this all to end. My birthday came around quickly in February. I was alone. In February, which I also spent alone. And by this point, I desperately wanted out of the nightmare that I was stuck in. There were talks of her returning to Florida for just a few days, but things weren't adding up in my mind. And before you know it, there were no signs of her pre-packed suitcase. Yeah, I need to change that. Before you know it, there was no sign of her or the pre-packed suitcase, which had disappeared from the top of the staircase. Life seems to have a wicked way of kicking you whilst you are down, and then something else horrible happened just to rub salt into my open wounds. I was down and hurt bad, and I mean really bad. One morning I had just arrived at work, only to have my distressed younger brother call me in uncontrollable tears. I rushed over to my parents, only to discover the tragic news that my nan had passed away. I was absolutely devastated, and as I stood over her beautiful shell, I realised that I had completely run out of tears to cry. I was emotionally empty. I needed something to take my mind away from this immense pain, so I decided to leave my grieving family and go back to hell to focus my mind on turning spanners. Later that evening, I went home to see that her car was back there, which meant that she was back from her getaway. I couldn't deal with any more emotional mayhem today. It was getting closer to the Cape Town trip, and the question that was bouncing around in my head was, do I stay or do I go? I was debating whether to take the leap of faith and go on my first ever solo trip abroad or not, and I was absolutely petrified. I had never booked a holiday for just myself before, and I barely knew how to navigate the airport on my own. So how could I make it around Cape Town for 2 weeks by myself? I need to change that, by myself. 2 weeks by myself. I wasn't used to making big choices like this, and I was extremely nervous. Plus, it didn't help me that many limited-minded people around me at that time were also adding fuel to my anxiety fire by pointing out all of the reasons for why I shouldn't go. The weekend just before I was due to leave, my fantastic friend agreed to go out with me for a last meal together before I left. This next part was what confirmed my belief in fate. So I'm going to stop there, my friends, and then we're going to come back to it on the next one. So thank you so much. Let's catch up on the next one, my friends. Goodbye.